In this video, we'll take a look at how to create simple maps and simple map visualizations in Tableau. As always, Tableau is pretty powerful and has a lot of options available to you to create different kinds of map visualizations for your data consumers. So let's learn some Tableau. First, I'll connect to a data source, and in this case, the book that you're reading uses rat sightings and trash collection in New York City. And, I wanted to be a little more positive maybe today, that trash collection and rat sightings weren't the best ways to start a map visualization effort. So I wanted to choose something I was more optimistic about. And that's offensive player statistics in the NFL between 1999 and 2013. Now you're probably asking, how does this relate to mapping? Okay, so let's say that I had a data consumer, perhaps someone affiliated with with professional football or a broadcaster, and we're preparing for the time of year when the NFL draft happens, and they were looking at where players come from and what states or towns have sent the most players to the NFL. Where are the locations that get the best or have had the most quarterbacks or different running backs, whatever. And so we can actually do that pretty easily in Tableau, and this shows the simple part of how to make a map. So I've got my data source here, and you'll see that there are multiple sheets, and I have one that says unique players, and that's the one I'd like to use. It makes our job a little easier because in that 1999 to 2013 data list, all of those players are not unique. So if that player played for 5 years, there are 5 entries for that player. And so in this case, we're looking at unique player data. So that would be different. Now, if we wanted to do some other kinds of visualizations, so for example, combine geographic data with these offensive statistics, then I would probably go to this sheet here. But at this point, this is the sheet we'll use, and I go to sheet 1. And sorry, my recording software always does this. So we're in sheet 1, and you'll see that we have a large number of measures, and we have birth zip code, which is one of the ones we can use right there. Home state is another one we can use, and town state. So we have some geographic measures. And Tableau's engine will automatically geocode zip codes, states, towns, and it's pretty powerful, so fairly intuitive. So it has lat-long coordinates for that. And what do I mean by lat-long coordinates? Lat-long coordinates are very simply the east to west and north to south lines that we use to slice the globe. And right, so our globe is a sphere, and when we look at a map, we've flattened out a sphere. Latitude and longitude help us identify coordinates in the globe. Latitude are the east to west lines that are here parallel and horizontal that run across the globe. 0 degrees latitude is the equator. Longitude lines run north-south, right? However, we use it to measure east-west position. So longitude, right, varies. 0 degrees longitude, it runs through Greenwich, England, and that's called the prime meridian. So 0 degrees longitude runs through Greenwich, England. It's the prime meridian, and that's where we get the origin of Greenwich Mean Time. At 180 degrees longitude is the international date line. And so that's how we divide the globe. So lat-long coordinates in Tableau, what does that mean? Very simply, in the previous unit in our course, we looked at scatter plots. Really, all lat-long is a scatter plot for the globe. And we're looking at column and row data, right? And the intersection of those points on the scatter plot. And that's how Tableau sees it. And so lat-long coordinates is a system we use to tell that scatter plot where things lie. And that's what it is. So let's say we wanted to look at where players come from and their birth zip codes or their town states. So if we look at our data source again, we get a better idea as to where things are at. So we have player right here. Okay. And as we scroll through this data set, we see that their Fant pause is their Fant position, or their position that they play. Their hometown and state, or their town state, right? Hometown, home state, and their town state. So we have that grouped, and we have their birth zip code. Okay. So we have a few options to make these visualizations, and we'll try them a couple ways. So in sheet 1, if I wanted to just go and try birth zip code, and then I select player, and notice that this has been assigned a geographic role, so I can always check. One, I'll see the globe, and I can check to make sure that its geographic role is properly allocated, and we see it is zip code, postcode. Player, and we expect that to be a string text, right? And position. And we go to show me, and you'll see that we can choose a symbol map here, or this kind of a map here. I want to use a symbol map. Now notice what happened is I got a bunch of different maps. So I didn't want that. So I want to take player, off of here, and Fant pause off of here. And so these are all of the zip codes that players were born in. And now what I want to do is take player. So I find player. And let's say I want to put player here in size. So the more players that come from a particular area, right, the bigger the size. Now there's another way to do that. We back out, and in this case we take measures, or number of records, because each record would be, we take number of records, because each record would be an individual player, and we drag that here to size. What we get is the measure of the number of players coming from these different cities. There's 10 unknown, so we can click on that and take a look at the locations. And we see that these are unrecognized zip codes. At this point, it's 10. So let's filter those out. So now we have, and I'll pull this over here. So now we have our visualization. If we want to move a map, we can go to this arrow here, and you'll see these tools. I want to select the X tool, or positioning tool, and I can drag the map. Okay, notice we got players from Hawaii. I can also zoom the map by going like this or like this. You'll notice that the wheel on your mouse will do the same. And so we're seeing this. Now let's say we want to have an active filter for our draft analyst and expert to talk about, you know, where these prime players who go to the NFL, where they come from in the United States. What's the big locations? Well, and we want to drill that down by position. So I can take Fant position, right? And I can make that a filter. And here I can select all. Okay. So that shows all players who play offense. And now I can show filter, and I'll drag that here. So now I have an interactive way of filtering it. So I just want to say very quickly, I just want quarterbacks. So where do we have the most quarterbacks? Now I also notice that size is there, right? And size is telling me something. But is this a clear visualization? Is this the best I can do? Well, if I expand the map, we see a lot of overlap. So what we probably want to do is go to color and change the opacity. 60% is probably a good spot, and a border that's black, and see if that works. And we'll see that we get an awful lot of activity here in California and Western Pennsylvania. Lots of records in Western Pennsylvania, southwestern New Jersey, and southeastern Pennsylvania seem to be hotbeds of quarterbacks. So this could be a workable visualization. We might want to also take Fant position and pull that to the color shelf. And that way, when we select running backs, it's a different color. And so if we were to select all, we can still see that they overlap. But we'll also see, by the way, that these points are smaller, right? Because there's only one. Or what we might do is decide, instead of color, what we might do is change this up and we could use shapes instead of circles. So the bigger this circle and more open, the more players come from here, right? So we have a little circle there, and we're surrounded by circles. We can also go through and then maybe apply the draft position or the player position to color now, and then select all, and that might give us a nice overall picture, but we're really looking to distinguish. So maybe as a visual in real time, as they do analysis on a program, we can see that by color these work better. So the thing to think about is the ability to see through all of these, using color and intensity, and making sure that you have clear borders, because for color we're still going to want that opacity there at 60. That's okay. If I want Fant position and I want color, that opacity looks good. We might even go up a bit, 70%. And that seems to be okay, but it's not great. So let's undo that. I think we got a better view here, and then we'd be viewing one at a time. But what I want you to get out of this first is, yes, I'll be expecting you to properly apply color and the other principles of good design, but the main thing here is showing you how to get this technique, how we put mapping data here. Now, if I wanted to do this differently, I can take hometown, and I've identified this as with a geographic role, right? That's city. And I take our number of records, and I make a map. We see the same thing. There's some unknowns that we'd have to look at, so we'd have to edit these locations. And what we can see is that these things can be ambiguous. And so when we don't have a zip code, right, that means that without matching state data, right, these things don't work. Now let's see if we can undo that and try home state, hometown, and number of records. And now there's only 99 unknowns. And what we have here there are some countries that are unrecognized. So there were players from these countries, and in this case our original question was we were not interested in these countries, but we see in cities that there are, and that's because these are identified with counties or places also outside the United States. So what we're going to do is with these 17 issues here, we can do this, saying we're only interested in places in the United States for this. So cancel that, we go back to here, and we'll just filter out those data because we're only interested in a view of the United States for this exercise or this particular question. So here we've got, I'll select my positioning tool again. And now I can also get my position filter here. We'll select all for now. And then I can show the filter. And we'll see the filter here, the number of records here, and I'll apply the font position, the color, and our size. We could make these bigger. Probably not a good idea. These are okay. Color, we want to edit the opacity down to about 60. Not 62, but 60. And I want black borders. You could go with gray borders and see what you think shows up better. And now we can sort, and I can just look for quarterbacks. And what we see here is that this area in Southern California has the some of the most activity, right? Once again, we see a lot of activity here in Pennsylvania and in Washington. So you made a simple visualization, a simple circle chart or simple circle map in a couple of different ways, and Tableau is pretty easy at identifying those things. Now, if we want to go back and say that question was bigger, we wanted to look at those other countries, we'd have to go in and think about that. So we filtered that data out, but if we wanted to look at countries, we'd have to go beyond the United States. And for that, we'd need a little more information in our data set. But as a first pass, you answered your question. You'll still use color and intensity and opacity to mark locations, and make sure you give titles and provide your caption. But you've made your first map.